The finale of Shogun was recently released, and with the absence of the show now being present and knowing that we're not going to be getting another episode again, it's something which is just gutting. Since the finale, I've been thinking about just how good of a show it was and all of the moments which really assisted in getting that feeling across the screen when watching it. So I thought it was only right to share what I felt the 5 most powerful moments in the entirety of the show were. So let's get into it. Here are the 5 most powerful moments in Shogun. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Number 5. Nagakado's death. Nagakado's death was a moment that's made it onto this list not because it was one of the most heartbreaking moments in the show or emotional moments, but because it was just so unexpected. Never did I expect Nagakado to die in the way that he did. Throughout the show, there was a naivety to the character and an inferiority complex that he had, but that being paired with Omi almost acting like the devil and getting him to do things that maybe he wouldn't have necessarily done without that influence was something which created the perfect cocktail for a disaster. Toranaga said a line in an earlier part of that specific episode where he said, "Why are the ones who have never fought in a battle so eager to get into one?" And Toranaga's description of his son was the very thing that summed up his demise. Nagakado wanted to kill his uncle for betraying his father, and when he stormed his quarters in the middle of the night, he ended up slipping, falling, and hitting his head on a rock which caused him to die where he laid. In general, the final 15 minutes of an episode of Shogun were always impactful and epic to watch, but this episode took it a step further and made the final 15 seconds of the episode have all of that behind it. With Saeki Nobutatsu just laughing in the rain at his nephew, who only seconds earlier was moments away from claiming his life, now being the one that was dead, it was a haunting moment to witness and one which I just didn't expect to see in the slightest. Number 4. Nagakado kills Jozen. This was probably one of the first big moments in the entirety of the show where we saw Shogun flex not only its performer's abilities in high-stake moments, but the visual effects and also the level of darkness and death that would be present. This whole moment in the final few minutes of the episode was the result of a well-paced story that was solely focused on Nagakado and the inferiority that he felt within his mind over the fact that he wasn't respected or seen as being in a position of power, despite the fact that he was Lord Yoshi Toranaga's son. With Yabushige being the person that was trusted in that episode, Nagakado was taunted by others, and it was mentioned how he wasn't seen as a trusted individual, so much so that it was festering within his mind throughout the entirety of it. The one lingering shot on Nagakado before the slaughtering happened, where it looked as though he was almost questioning himself about if he should go through with the plan that he'd set up where he wanted to kill Jozen and his men as a statement, was something which I thought just perfectly summed up Nagakado's mindset. He wanted to be respected, but you could tell that he was questioning if what he was doing was going to better the cause for his father or if it would be a foolish mistake. The visuals in this scene were so well executed, and having a half-blown to pieces Jozen speaking his final words before Nagakado took a sword to him was a moment that has long lived in my memory since it aired in the early parts of the season. Yabushige's panicked face, Omi's smile, and Lady Mariko also looking distraught and saying the line, "It is war." It laid down the foundations for the conflict that would later come in the season and the rivalry that was there between Ishido in Osaka and Toranaga in Edo. It was a great moment and it definitely deserves to be on the list. Number 3. Yabushige's death. Yabushige's death was something that I thought was just simply poetic in the show. It was a death that needed to occur, and I think we all knew that it was going to happen. The fact that he'd played both sides for so long and he ultimately had a large involvement in the biggest death in the entire show, he was always going to be punished for it. Within the 80s show, Yabushige's seppuku was something which was more public, but in the FX show it was an intimate exchange between Toranaga and Yabushige, something which I thought worked really well. The pair had known each other for a long time, so having it be more intimate was an approach that I thought just suited it so much more. Having this scene set on a cliff, a place where Yabushige almost faced death in the very first episode of the show, it was something which I thought almost provided a full circle moment. The symbol of a cliff that he was saved from and him having a new chance of life was the very thing which his lifeless body was pushed off of right at the end, ready to be consumed by the hungry dog whose belly it would fill. Yabushige being desperate to know what Toranaga's plan was in his dying moments was something which I felt summed up why he was so traitorous. Maybe if he did know the plan, he may have felt as though he would have been siding with the safer pair of hands. But because he didn't, there was always that fear. Toranaga saying, "Why tell a dead man the future?" which was the line that Yabushige said to Omi about Toranaga in the early part of the show, was something which highlighted that nothing got past Toranaga, and it also showed that his spies were everywhere, watching and listening. Toranaga knew all along what Yabushige was going to do, and I think he always knew that he'd be the very person who would draw the sword that would end his life. For me, this moment was all about conversation and the conclusion of the entire traitorous arc that Yabushige had. It was the perfect way for the character to go, face to face with the person who he was most fake around and was prepared to betray a countless number of times. Number 2. Hiromatsu committing seppuku. For me, this definitely deserves to be this high up on the list. It was at a time where we didn't truly understand what Toranaga was doing. We knew that he was scheming, but there was a genuine belief that he was going to hand himself and his men over to Ishido and have himself and half of his men commit seppuku. The division that was present amongst the daimyo and supporters that didn't agree with what Toranaga was doing was something which took prominence, and it was only Hiromatsu who truly believed that Toranaga had a secret plan. We didn't find out if Hiromatsu was informed by Toranaga of what he was doing and wanting to convince Ishido that he was genuine about going to Osaka when he didn't really plan on doing so. But I like to think that Hiromatsu knew his old friend so well that he committed seppuku because he knew that it was his role in the plan in ensuring that Toranaga won. Hiromatsu knew that he needed to do it to add believability to the whole situation and ensure that Ishido would be convinced once word got back to him that Toranaga just let his most loyal and oldest friend die. Hiromatsu's lines in this scene were delivered so well, and the facial expressions were one of the main things that I actually thought were stronger than the words that were spoken. You could see the pain in Hiromatsu's face in knowing what he needed to do, but also the loyalty that was there in wanting his friend to achieve Shogun. The moment that sealed it for me though was when Toranaga broke character slightly in the hard, emotionless front that he was putting up. When Toda Buntaro seconded his father, Toranaga's face almost looked in disgust for a brief moment, and you could tell that he was hurt by what had just happened. By that point, he'd lost his son and his dearest friend, so even though it was a look of hurt that was present on his face, it was one of determination and knowing that he needed to win what he was embarking on, otherwise it would have all been for nothing. It was a brilliant scene that contained great performances, emotion, tension, and a conclusion which showed that there was only more to come and that things were only going to get tougher. Number 1. Mariko's death. The moment that I feel deserves to come in first place in this list is Akechi Mariko's death. Mariko had spent the entirety of the season wanting to be able to commit seppuku, but she was always forbidden to do it by Toranaga and also her husband Toda Buntaro. She wanted to do this because of the events which occurred between her father and the former lord which he betrayed, ultimately bringing shame upon the family and her wanting to rid herself of what she called the abyss of life. Mariko's death was something which Toranaga may have accounted for as part of his plan, but what was incredible about Mariko's death was the fact that we were lured into a false sense of security as the episode went on. We felt like she could have been killed when she first tried to leave Osaka, then another time where she was going to commit seppuku, but with her being spared on both occasions, there was a sense that maybe she was gonna be okay. However, that wasn't the case at all. She knew that her opportunity was there when the ninjas arrived, and she saw it as her way to finally rid herself of the life that she wanted to leave, but die knowing that her death would have a greater purpose, and it did eventually go on to have one, as it was what ultimately led to the hostages being released and many of Ishido's men defecting and switching allegiances. The emotion that was present following Mariko's death was something which was just unlike anything else that happened in the show. We spent 9 whole episodes getting to know this character, feeling the struggles that she carried with her in being married to Toda Buntaro, the love that she felt for John Blackthorne and him being the only glimpse of happiness that she had in her life, and also the loyalty that she had to Yoshi Toranaga, and seeing her being killed was a moment that I think every viewer felt. John Blackthorne's reaction following her death was something that I also thought added weight to that moment too. In the immediate aftermath, seeing him cradling her body and just wanting her to be okay was all of us in that moment. And also, when he was leaving Osaka, when he was trying to hold back the tears, it really did show just how much he cared for her and how devastated he was over the fact that she was no longer around. The score in that scene was just beautiful too. It really suited the tone and feel of the scene, and it added an extra layer that I didn't even know that scene needed at that point. Mariko's death was something that needed to happen for the story to develop, and even though it felt like it was coming, I think we all still believed that there was a chance that she wouldn't end up being killed. This was probably the most talked about moment in the show, probably more than the finale itself, and for that reason I think it definitely deserves to take the top spot. There were so many good moments within this show, which could have definitely made it into the top 5. More subtle moments, such as the conversation that occurred between Lady Ochiba no Kata and Mariko in episode 9, the emotional scene between Fuji-sama and John Blackthorne on the boat, and also Ishido and Sugiyama's encounter in the woods, so it was hard whittling it down to only 5, but I stand by these 5 and think that they're the strongest in the series. So, there you have it. What I believe are the 5 most powerful moments in Shogun. If you want to see more videos on Shogun, then click on the card in the top corner. I broke down every episode in the show, so if you want to see every episode, then head over to the channel where you'll find an entire playlist. What are your most powerful moments? Do you agree with me? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.